Dorian Mercer was 34 years old, and there was a ring in his jacket pocket. He had picked it up that morning after having it resized, and the small velvet box still carried the warmth of his body. Because in 3 weeks he planned to get down on one knee and propose to the woman he loved. He came home early that afternoon for one simple reason. He wanted to be near her. He let himself in quietly through the side door. Before he could even put down his keys, he heard her voice coming from the living room. She was on FaceTime with her best friend, relaxed, unguarded, completely certain she was alone. Dorian stopped walking because she was talking about him and what Vanessa said about the man standing silently in that hallway. The man with her engagement ring still warm inside his pocket was so dismissive, so deliberate, and so final that the proposal he had been planning for months ended right there before he ever said a word. He did not move. He did not make a sound. He simply stood there and listened until he had heard enough. Then he turned around, walked back through the same door, and left. Everything that happened after that was something Vanessa never saw coming. Before we get into the story, tell me where in the world you're watching from and subscribe, because the next story is one you won't want to miss. The sky was still dark with the last traces of night when Dorian Mercer pulled onto the job site. Dawn had barely started to break and the streetlights were still glowing. His truck headlights swept across the unfinished house, revealing exposed framing, an open roof, and stacks of plywood waiting in the yard like a promise that had not yet been completed. Dorian shut off the engine, picked up his coffee, and stayed behind the wheel for a moment, simply looking at the structure. This was his favorite part of any job. Before the crew arrived, before the saws started, before everything became movement, decisions, questions and problems that needed answers. For a few quiet minutes, it was just Dorian and the building. A house stripped down to what it truly was. He could read a structure the way some men read faces. Every opening, every joint, every load-bearing wall. He could look at all of it at once and understand what was holding, what was carrying weight correctly, and what would eventually fail if nobody fixed it. 8 years working under Gideon Keene's name had given him that eye. 8 years of doing work while someone else's name went on the finished project. 8 years before Dorian finally walked away and started Mercer Builds at 29 with a second-hand truck, 3 good tools, and a reputation he had earned entirely with his own hands. 5 years later, the company was profitable and growing. His crew was small, but dependable. Dorian had chosen every person the same way he chose almost everything in his life, carefully and without rushing. The crew arrived as the morning settled in. 7 men moved across the site with the easy efficiency of people who knew their jobs and trusted the person leading them. Dorian greeted every one of them by name. He asked Reggie about his daughter, who had recently started middle school. He asked Raoul whether he had finally gotten his truck looked at. It was ordinary conversation, but it was real. Dorian remembered what people told him. It was not management strategy. It was simply who he was. Before long, the site was fully alive. Saws were running. Lumber was moving. The whole property carried the particular rhythm of men who understood exactly what they were trying to build. Dorian was reviewing a section of the revised framing plan near the back of the structure when something caught his eye. One of the newer workers, a young man Reggie had recommended, had only been with the crew for a couple of weeks. He was eager, capable, and just a little too fast. On one section of the interior framing, he had installed a run of boards in the wrong orientation. It was not dangerous yet, but if the mistake disappeared behind wall sheathing, fixing it later would take several times longer than correcting it now. Dorian crouched beside the work. He did not shout across the site. He did not embarrass the young man in front of everyone else. I waited until the worker turned and noticed him. Come here for a second, Dorian said. His voice was quiet and even. The young man's name was Micah Grant. He approached with the careful walk of someone who already suspected he had made a mistake. Dorian pointed toward the framing. See how these boards are running. Micah looked. Yeah. Which direction is the load traveling through this wall? Micah studied the framing. His face changed when he recognized the problem. Vertical, he said. Right. Dorian tapped the misaligned boards. So what are these doing? Micah crouched beside him and looked at his own work. They're fighting the load. Exactly, Dorian said. I did not say you did this wrong. There was no need. We catch it now. It costs us about 40 minutes. We catch it after the wall is closed. It costs half a day and a bad conversation with the client. Which one do you want? Micah was already reaching for the lumber. Take your time with it, Dorian said. Then he moved on. Dorian owned the house he lived in. He had bought it 7 years earlier, before the neighborhood became what it was becoming now. He renovated the entire place himself during evenings and weekends over the course of a year. The house was now worth roughly 3 times what he had paid for it. He also owned 2 rental properties. Both had been renovated. Both were occupied. Both produced steady monthly income that went directly into an investment account he rarely touched. No one looking at Dorian Mercer on a job site would have guessed any of that. He drove a work truck, and he wore durable work jackets. He arrived before dawn and usually left after everyone else. His money was quiet because he had built it quietly, one layer at a time, the same way he built everything else. Starting with the foundation, only 2 people understood the full financial picture. Terence, his younger brother, worked in finance and understood numbers the way Dorian understood structures. And Lenora Brooks, the attorney who had represented Mercer Builds since the company was 2 years old, had helped organize the legal framework around everything Dorian owned. And he had never felt any need to tell anyone else. In Dorian's mind, full partnership had to be earned before it was granted. I had not reached that point with anyone. Almost, though. I was eating lunch in his truck. A sandwich in one hand, a thermos nearby. Blueprints spread across the passenger seat when his phone buzzed on the dashboard. A local number appeared on the screen. The jewelry store, Dorian answered. Mr. Mercer, your ring is ready. The resizing came out beautifully. You can pick it up whenever you're ready. Dorian looked through the windshield at the house taking shape in front of him. I'll come by before I head to the job site, he said. The next time the store opened, Dorian arrived shortly beforehand. He sat in his truck in the mostly empty parking lot with the engine off, watching the lights come on inside. A woman in a burgundy blazer moved behind the display cases, turning on lamps and preparing the store. The street around him was beginning to wake up. A delivery truck passed. A jogger moved along the sidewalk. A woman walked a dog that seemed determined to stop and inspect everything. Dorian did not mind waiting. I was good at waiting. When the store opened, he went inside. The woman who had called him greeted him at the counter, disappeared into the back, and returned carrying a small black velvet box on a white cloth tray. She placed it in front of him with the care people use when they understand that a small object can carry a very large meaning. Dorian opened the box. The ring rested inside the velvet, polished and exact. Simple setting. Clean lines. He had chosen it because it looked like something designed to last, not something designed only to impress. Vanessa had admired a similar ring in a store window 3 months earlier. She had mentioned it casually, never realizing Dorian was paying attention. He had been paying attention to a lot of things for a long time. The woman asked whether everything looked right. Yes, Dorian said. It's right. He paid, thanked her, and walked back outside. For a moment, he stood beside his truck in the cool air, with the closed velvet box resting in his hand. He did not open it again. He simply held it, feeling the small weight of the ring and everything he believed it represented. Dorian had been with Vanessa for 2 years. I had not rushed a single day of the relationship. I had watched, listened, waited. When he finally became certain, completely certain, he bought the ring. That had been 3 weeks earlier. Since then, he had been planning the proposal with the same quiet care he brought to everything that mattered. Dorian slipped the box into his jacket pocket, climbed into the truck, and drove to the job site. Before long, he noticed his hand moving toward the pocket without conscious thought. It happened while he stood near the back of the site, watching Curtis and Raoul guide a long beam into position. His fingers found the small rectangular shape through the fabric, pressed against it once, then moved away. It was almost like checking that something valuable was still where he had left it. His hand drifted there again during a materials call. Then later, while he crouched over foundation plans, I was not nervous. I was not anxious. It was simply a quiet reflex born from meaning. He liked having the ring with him. That surprised him. I had expected its weight to feel like pressure. Instead, it felt almost like ballast, something that kept him level in a way he could not explain. An inspection call came in later that afternoon. A city inspector had a family issue and needed to move the appointment to the following week. Dorian agreed without hesitation. It was a small setback, easy to absorb. He confirmed the new appointment and looked around the site. His crew could handle the rest of the day without him. Reggie understood the plan. Everything was moving the way it should. Dorian considered returning to the office and getting ahead on paperwork. He thought about stopping by the supply yard to confirm a delivery. He could think of several useful things to do with the unexpected free time. Then he thought about Vanessa. She was working from home that day. He pictured her sitting at the small desk in the corner of her living room with her laptop open and a cup of coffee growing cold beside her because she always made coffee and forgot to finish it. Her hair would probably be up. She would be wearing something comfortable. She would look up when she heard him come in, and her face would soften in that familiar way it always did when she saw him unexpectedly. Dorian was not going to propose that afternoon. Not yet. He simply wanted to be near her. He told Reggie he was heading out. Reggie nodded while continuing to work. Dorian drove to Vanessa's place and used his key at the side door, the entrance near the kitchen hallway that avoided the noisy hinges on the front door. I was not trying to sneak in. He always used that entrance when Vanessa was working because he did not want the sound of the main door to break her concentration. He stepped inside, closed the door, reached toward the lock, and heard her voice. She was in the living room, relaxed, animated, comfortable. The easy voice of someone speaking privately to a person she trusted. Dorian still had his keys in his hand when he heard Vanessa say his name. He stopped walking. The keys were in his right hand. The velvet box rested in the left side of his jacket. He could feel both at once. The cold metal teeth of the keys against his palm. The small warm weight of the ring against his ribs. He stood inside the hallway and listened. Dorian is sweet, Vanessa was saying. He genuinely is. But sweetness is like a pause. It's like, okay, great, you're sweet. What else? Brielle Lawson's voice came through the phone speaker, thinner than Vanessa's voice in the room. What do you mean, what else? I mean, he's a contractor, Brielle. Vanessa said contractor, the way a person says a word whose value they have already decided. Flat, final. Like a door closing. He drives out to job sites every morning, manages his little crew, comes home, and that's it. That's the whole thing. That's all there is. Dorian's fingers tightened slightly around the keys. Hunt does well for himself, though, Brielle said. Doesn't he? Sure. He's comfortable. He's not broke or anything. Vanessa sounded patient now, almost as if she were explaining something obvious. But comfortable isn't vision. Comfortable isn't ambition. I've genuinely tried to imagine where we are 5 years from now, and every time I picture it, I just see the same thing. She paused. The same house, the same truck, the same Saturday morning trip to the hardware store. And that's bad, Brielle asked. It's ordinary, Brielle. Vanessa did not sound cruel. That was what settled into Dorian like cold water. She was not speaking with anger or resentment. She was stating it the way someone states a fact about the weather. Is an ordinary man. He has already peaked. And the hard part is, I don't even think he knows it. You can feel it on him. That's settled, comfortable. This is enough kind of energy. Vanessa paused. Maybe that's fine for someone else. It's probably fine for a lot of women. Another pause. It's just not fine for me. Then why haven't you told him? Brielle asked. Because the timing is never right. Vanessa's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. And because he is a good man. He really is. I don't want to hurt him. But you're going to. I know. The answer came quietly, almost without disturbance. I keep waiting for a moment that feels right. Something clean. I don't want it to turn into a whole thing. She paused again. He's going to be heartbroken, though. Genuinely heartbroken. He actually thinks I'm it for him. You can see it every time he looks at me. Brielle was quiet for a moment.
That's a lot to carry, she said.
I know. Vanessa made a small sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. The sound of someone who found another person's feelings slightly inconvenient. It's actually kind of sad. He's out here completely committed, and I'm just waiting. Dorian looked down. He had pressed one palm against the wall without noticing. He slowly moved his hand away. Then Brielle asked a question. Does he know about Nolan? The words landed in the hallway like something dropped from a great height.
God, no.
Vanessa laughed. Quick, easy, completely uncomplicated. The kind of laugh someone gives when the idea itself seems almost absurd.
No, absolutely not.
Brielle's voice became more careful.
Okay.
It's fine, Vanessa said. Everything is fine. I just need to figure out the timing. Dorian remained in the hallway for another moment. I did not move. I did not make a sound. He stood inside a place where he had felt safe. Keys in one hand and a ring in his pocket, and let every final word settle until there was nothing left to hear. Then he turned around. I went back out through the side door the same way he had entered. Slowly, quietly. He pulled it shut behind him with the same care he had used when he arrived. The latch caught without a sound. Dorian walked to his truck and got inside. For a long moment, he simply sat there. Then he reached into his jacket and removed the velvet box. I did not open it. He looked at it in his palm. Small, dark, exact. Then he placed it on the passenger seat. Outside the truck, the street remained completely ordinary. A sprinkler started across the road. A kid on a bicycle rolled past without looking toward him. Dorian started the engine. I did not go back inside. He pulled away from the curb and drove, with the ring box sitting untouched on the passenger seat beside him. Terrence's apartment was on the 4th floor of a midtown building. It was clean and compact, with the faint smell of coffee and whatever Terrence had cooked earlier. Dorian had not called ahead. I never needed to with his brother. He simply showed up. Terrence opened the door, and that was enough. Terrence took one look at Dorian's face and stepped aside without asking anything. They sat at the kitchen table. Terrence poured 2 glasses of water. Neither brother touched them. Dorian talked. He did not raise his voice. I did not add dramatic interpretation. He laid out the conversation the way he would lay out a job estimate. Every line item in order. Nothing skipped. Sweet, but that's all he has. Just a contractor. Ordinary. He has peaked and doesn't even know it. Dorian repeated Vanessa's words exactly. His voice stayed level. He barely looked up from the table. Terrence became very still. People who did not know him well thought Terrence was always moving, always talking, always ready with something to say. Most of the time, they were right. But when something truly mattered, Terrence could become completely motionless. I was motionless now. His jaw tightened. His eyes had gone dark and quiet. Not with surface irritation, but with the deeper kind of anger that takes time before it makes noise. Dorian reached the end of the story. He said Nolan's name. He repeated Brielle's question. He repeated Vanessa's answer. God, no. He told Terrence about the easy laugh that followed. Then Dorian stopped speaking. The refrigerator hummed behind them. Somewhere downstairs, a door closed. Terrence finally spoke. I'm going over there. No. Dorian, no. Dorian's voice was flat and final. Not loud. Simply finished. Sit down. Terrence had not actually stood, but something inside his posture had leaned forward. Now he settled back. He looked directly at his brother. Dorian met his eyes. She thinks I don't know, Dorian said. That's the only advantage I have right now. Oh, and I'm not throwing it away tonight. She sat there and called you ordinary. Not to my face, Dorian said. To Brielle's. She doesn't know I was standing in that hallway. She is going to sleep tonight, believing everything is normal. Dorian picked up his glass, then set it back down without drinking. I want her to keep believing that for a little while. Terrence stayed quiet. She's been building something behind my back, Dorian said. I need to know what it is before I move. All of it. Not half. Not most. All of it. He looked steadily at his brother. You know people in finance. Nolan Pierce. Does the name mean anything to you? Terrence thought for a moment, then shook his head. Regional Vice President. Something in wellness distribution, I think. Vanessa met him at a conference. Dorian's voice remained even. I need whatever is publicly available. Professional background. Where he works. Who he works with. What his public footprint looks like. I'm not asking for anything private or illegal. I just need somebody who knows how to find what is already out there. Quickly. Terence nodded. I have 2 people who can put that together within a couple of days. That's fine. Terence studied his brother for a long moment. There was something in his face beyond anger now. Something older. The look of a younger brother who had spent years watching Dorian work, build, sacrifice, and give, and who understood exactly what all of it had cost. You all right? Terence asked. Dorian looked at the table. Not tonight, he said, but I will be. That was all either of them needed to say. Dinner at Vanessa's place was chicken and rice, something she had prepared while Dorian was gone. She asked where he had been. He said he had stopped by Terence's apartment. Vanessa said that was nice. She served dinner, poured herself a glass of wine, and the evening continued in the ordinary, warm, completely false way it always had. Dorian washed the dishes. Vanessa dried them. She bumped her shoulder gently against his at the sink. Dorian smiled at her. The smile came easier than he expected. That told him something about himself he was not sure he wanted to understand yet. Later, Vanessa reached for his hand on the couch. Dorian let her take it. Her fingers closed around his while the television played. He sat beside her and realized he did not feel what he believed he should have felt. He felt something else. Something careful. Something clear. Something very cold. The velvet box was inside the glove compartment of his truck, parked outside in the driveway. Dorian left it there. That night, he lay on his back staring at the dark ceiling while Vanessa slept beside him. Her breathing became slow and even. She had no trouble sleeping. Dorian replayed every sentence he had heard. You can feel it on him. This is enough energy. It's actually kind of sad. He allowed every phrase to remain in his mind without trying to push it away. She thinks men like me never go anywhere, he thought. She has no idea how far I've already planned to go. A message from Terence arrived a couple of days later. Come by. That was all it said. No explanation. Dorian read it between site visits, slipped his phone back into his pocket, and finished the rest of his work without allowing his expression to change. When he arrived at Terence's apartment later, his brother was standing at the kitchen counter with a folder in his hand. Actual paper. Printed pages. Terence only did that when something felt serious enough that he did not want it living only on a screen. He placed the folder on the table. Sit down, Terence said. Dorian sat. Terence remained standing with his arms folded. His voice was controlled. Not exactly calm, but controlled in the way a man's voice becomes controlled after he has already spent days being angry and has run out of places to put the anger. Nolan Pierce, he said. 38. Regional Vice President at a wellness distribution company based in Charlotte. Before that, he was a sales director at 2 different health brands over 6 years. Clean professional record. Well connected. He moves through a very specific circle. Industry conferences. Brand partnerships. That whole world. Terence paused. Vanessa's world. Dorian looked at the folder, but did not open it yet. My contact placed them together at a hotel in Charlotte. Terence continued. 3 months ago. The conference she told you she attended alone. There it was. Dorian did not move. He heard the information the way he heard a crack inside a wall. Small, precise. The kind of sound that tells an experienced builder. Something structural has already failed and has probably been failing quietly for a long time. She was distant during that trip, Dorian said. I know. I thought it was the project she was managing. I know. Dorian stayed quiet for a moment. Then he opened the folder. There were printed photographs. Nothing compromising. Nothing needed to be. Conference name badges. A group photograph from an industry dinner where Vanessa and Nolan stood close enough to suggest familiarity without proving anything by itself. Another event in a different city several months earlier. A LinkedIn screenshot showed mutual contacts and shared industry events. Dates and locations formed a line when placed in order. That line went back almost a year. This wasn't one conference, Dorian said.
No, Terence replied. It wasn't.
Dorian set the papers down one by one, slowly and carefully, the way he set tools down after a long day.
Not because the papers were fragile.
Because he was.
How many events? He asked. My contact found 4 where the familiarity is visible. There could be more. Terence finally pulled out the chair across from Dorian and sat down. He rested his elbows on the table. She's been managing this for at least 12 months, Dorian. This whole time you were.
He stopped. Planning, Dorian finished. Yeah, the word stayed between them. 12 months.
Dorian had spent that time comparing rings, running numbers, quietly rehearsing what he might say while kneeling in front of Vanessa.
He had thought about where to propose. He had wondered whether he should call her father first. Meanwhile, Vanessa had been attending industry dinners with Nolan Pierce and standing beside him closely enough for the pictures to tell their own quiet story.
For 12 months, she had not stumbled into something. She had built something. That realization hurt in a way Dorian understood almost too well.
Vanessa had built her secret carefully, deliberately, one layer at a time.
The same way Dorian built structures.
Except what she had built was a parallel life, and its foundation was Dorian standing still, trusting her completely, and never realizing there were questions he needed to ask.
Dorian closed the folder. I did not throw it.
He did not push away from the table. He rested both hands flat against the cover and took one slow breath. When he looked up at Terence, his face was composed.
I need to talk to Lenora, he said.
Terence nodded.
I figured.
Not about Vanessa, specifically. About my assets. I want to know exactly where everything stands before I do anything else. You think she'd try to take something? No.
Dorian shook his head.
It's not about what she might do. It's about what I know. I want to walk into whatever comes next with the complete picture. Not most of it. I looked at Terence. All of it.
Terence held his gaze.
Okay. Dorian stood, picked up the folder and tucked it beneath his arm. I would not leave it behind. I would file it the way he filed blueprints. Flat. Organized. Labeled. A record showing where the damage was and how deep it ran, kept close until he understood what needed to happen next. Dorian left Terence's apartment and sat in his truck inside the parking structure for a moment before starting the engine.
Then he called Lenora Brooks.
She answered quickly.
Before she could get much further than hello, Dorian spoke.
I need a private lunch. Just the two of us. I need to talk through some things involving my assets and how they're protected.
There was a brief silence.
Lenora knew him well enough not to press for details over the phone. I can make time soon, she said.
Good. I'll send you the place.
Thank you. Dorian ended the call. The folder sat on the passenger seat beside his phone.
He looked down at his hands resting on the steering wheel. Calloused, scarred in small places.
The hands of a man who had been building things since he was 22 and had never really stopped.
I was not finished building now.
Lenora was already at the table when Dorian arrived for their meeting. That was a Lenora habit. She was always there first. She once told Dorian that being early was the only useful form of control in an uncertain world, and he had never forgotten the sentence. A glass of water sat in front of her. Her phone was face down beside it, which meant she had cleared enough space in her schedule to give the conversation her full attention. Lenora looked up when Dorian approached.
She did not exactly smile. She simply watched him with the direct, measuring attention she always gave him when she knew something was wrong.
It never felt judgmental.
It felt like inventory.
Like she was counting what remained, standing before deciding what needed reinforcement.
Dorian sat across from her. He ordered coffee and waited until the server walked away. Then he told Lenora everything. He told the story the same way he had told Terence.
Flat, factual, in order, no performance.
The side door,
the keys in his hand, his name in Vanessa's mouth.
He repeated the exact words that had stayed with him.
Ordinary, peaked, kind of sad.
He repeated them in the same tone Vanessa had used, not to dramatize the pain, but to place the facts on the table where Lenora could examine them clearly. Then he told her about Nolan Pierce.
Charlotte.
The folder Terence had assembled.
The conference photographs. The line of public events stretching back a full year.
Lenora did not interrupt once. She kept both hands around her water glass and listened.
When Dorian finished, she allowed the silence to remain for a moment longer.
That was another Lenora habit. She never filled silence merely to be polite. She filled it when she had something worth saying. "Is Vanessa on any of your accounts?" Lenora asked.
No. Any joint lease?
No. She pays her own rent. I own my house.
Shared investments? Anything she signed with you? Or anything you signed with her?
Nothing. Dorian shook his head. We weren't there yet. I was careful about that. Not because I suspected anything. I just believe that kind of partnership has to be earned. Lenora nodded slowly.
Okay.
She unfolded her hands and leaned back slightly.
Then you're clean, Dorian. Whatever you decide to do next, she cannot touch any of it. Your house,
the rental properties, the business accounts, everything is yours. The ownership structure is correct, and she has no legal claim to a single dollar. I know, Dorian said. That's not why I called you.
Lenora looked at him.
Then tell me why. Because I need 3 more weeks, Dorian said. And I need to be smart about how I use them.
I explained what he meant.
I did not want Vanessa suspicious. He did not want her defensive, distant, or preparing herself for confrontation.
I needed her exactly as she was now. Comfortable, certain,
privately condescending in a way she had no idea he had witnessed. I needed Vanessa to believe everything remained normal.
To believe Dorian Mercer was still the man she had quietly filed away under manageable,
right up until the moment he was not.
I want a formal letter. Drafted, Dorian said. Not delivered. Not sent. Just ready. I want every fact documented. What I heard. What Terence found. The events. The dates that matter as evidence. Everything written clearly and ready to use if it becomes necessary. Ready to use where?
Lenora asked. There was no skepticism in the question.
Only precision. With whoever needs it, Dorian replied. I don't know the complete shape of this yet, but I want the record to exist. I want it written down, reviewed by you, and ready. Lenora studied him for a long moment.
Then she reached into her bag and removed a small notebook. She still preferred a physical notebook for important conversations, another detail. Dorian had always remembered about her.
Lenora uncapped her pen. I'll prepare the draft, she said. I'll keep it clean. Facts only. Dates where they matter.
Direct quotes only where you're certain of the wording. I'm certain of the wording. I know you are. She wrote something down. What else?
When the time comes, I need you somewhere with me. As a witness. Not only as my attorney.
As someone who can confirm what I told you, what you've reviewed, and that none of this is a misunderstanding or an emotional overreaction.
Lenora did not hesitate. Tell me when and where, she said. I'll be there. Dorian nodded.
They ordered lunch and talked quietly through practical details. There was no wasted conversation. They had known each other long enough that neither of them needed to spend time on parts that did not matter. By the time the food arrived, what Dorian was building had edges.
Dimensions.
It was no longer anger with nowhere to go. It was a structure. And structures were something he understood. After lunch, Dorian sat in his truck and made 2 calls. The first was to Graham Webb, a developer he had been speaking with carefully for several months about a mixed-use renovation project worth $2.4 million. It was the kind of contract that could double Mercer Builds' profile in a single move. Dorian had been slow to commit because he wanted to be certain the company was ready.
Now he was certain.
Graham answered after a few rings. I've made my decision, Dorian said. I'm ready to move forward. There was a brief pause. Then Graham's voice warmed immediately. That's what I was hoping to hear. I'll get the paperwork started. Good, Dorian said. Let's build something.
His second call was to his bank. Dorian moved a significant portion of his liquid savings into a separate account held only in his own name. Clean, organized, clearly defined.
I was not hiding money.
I was clarifying ownership. The way a builder marks load-bearing walls before a renovation so nobody accidentally cuts through the wrong structure.
When the call ended, Dorian drove back to the job site. He parked, shut off the engine, reached into the back seat for his hard hat, and settled it onto his head. The afternoon sun was still high.
His crew was working. Dorian could hear the sight before he reached it. The sound of progress. The sound of things being made.
He pulled on his gloves and walked toward the noise. He felt calm.
Not numb. Calm.
The particular calm of a man who had stopped waiting to understand the problem and had started solving it. Dorian went back to work. The next unexpected message came through Graham Webb's office. Dorian was on a job site when his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. The message was short and careful. "This is Brielle Lawson. I got your number through Graham's office. I know that's strange. I need 10 minutes, please."
Dorian read it twice. Then he slipped the phone into his shirt pocket and finished directing the crew through the framing work in front of them. Only when he reached a quiet edge of the lot did he answer. "Name the place."
Brielle was already waiting when Dorian arrived.
The coffee shop was small and forgettable. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu, and almost no chance that either of them would be recognized. Dorian had deliberately passed other places on the way there. Brielle sat at a corner table with a coffee she had not touched.
She looked like someone who had left work and then changed her mind about how formal she wanted to appear. A blazer. No bag. Both hands resting flat on the table. When Dorian entered, she looked up. Something changed in her face. Not exactly relief. More like the expression of someone who had finally made a decision after repeatedly approaching it and pulling away. Dorian ordered black coffee, carried it to the table, and sat across from her. "I appreciate you coming," Brielle said. "You asked for 10 minutes, Dorian replied. "You have 10 minutes. She nodded. Her eyes dropped toward the untouched coffee. Then she looked back at him. Her voice was steady when she began, but her hands were not. They pressed against the tabletop, as if she needed something solid beneath them. "Vanessa and I had a falling out," she said. "It wasn't about you. What it was about doesn't really matter. But after it happened, I couldn't keep carrying this. I've been carrying it for months, and it's not right." She stopped and started again. "What's been happening isn't right, and you deserve to know." Dorian said nothing. I gave her room to find her footing. "She's been talking to her family," Brielle said. "Her mother, her sister. For months, she's been telling them you're not serious marriage material, that you're financially unreliable, that your business doesn't have real prospects." Brielle paused and watched his face. Dorian's expression did not change. "She told them she's been staying with you while she figures out her next move. She told them she's waiting for the right time to end the relationship." Dorian wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "I did not drink. I simply held it. She was building the story ahead of time," Brielle continued. "So when she eventually left, nobody in her family would ask too many questions. It would already make sense to them. You would already be the man who wasn't enough. She was making sure of that." Brielle's jaw tightened. She wasn't drifting, Dorian. She had a plan. She had a timeline. "And Nolan," Dorian said. It was not a question. Brielle lowered her eyes briefly. "Charlotte was real. I know you probably know some of that already, but I don't think you know how far it went. They've talked about Vanessa moving. Nolan has a regional office about 4 hours from here, and they've had serious conversations about her relocating to be closer to him." Brielle looked directly at Dorian. "She wasn't planning to leave you and figure out the rest afterward. She already knew where she intended to go. She just hadn't told you yet." The coffee shop continued around them as though nothing important was happening. Someone laughed near the counter. A chair scraped across the floor. Ordinary sounds from a world that had no idea. It was only a few feet away from the moment a man finally learned exactly how carefully his life had been managed without his knowledge. Dorian looked at Brielle for a long moment. She did not look away. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came out raw, the way words sometimes do after they have been held inside too long. "I should have done something earlier. I don't even know what the right thing would have been. But staying quiet this long wasn't it." Dorian set down the coffee cup. "I have one question." Brielle waited. "If I needed you to say everything you just told me in front of Vanessa, in a room where she could hear it herself, would you do that?" Brielle became quiet. The silence carried weight. Then she answered, "Yes." Dorian nodded once. He thanked her, and he meant it. Not warmly, not coldly, plainly. The way he said most things that mattered. He left enough money to cover both coffees. and walked outside. Dorian sat in his truck for a moment before starting the engine. The afternoon light was flat and grey, the kind of light that made everything appear exactly as it was. He reached into the glove compartment and took out the velvet ring box. He did not open it. He held it in both hands. The velvet had begun to wear slightly at one corner from all the times he had touched it without thinking. Dorian thought about what Brielle had just told him. A timeline, a story prepared in advance, a version of him already delivered to the people whose opinions mattered to Vanessa, so that when she finally left, the explanation would already be waiting. Vanessa had made Dorian the ending of a story he never knew she was writing. He held the ring for another moment. Then he returned it to the glove compartment and closed it. Not yet. Dorian extended the invitation casually one evening while Vanessa sat on his couch scrolling through her phone. My mother's birthday dinner is coming up, he said from the kitchen. Small dinner at her place. Just family. Lenora is coming too. I'd like you to be there. Vanessa looked up. Something warm moved across her face. It was the practiced warmth of someone who understood what an invitation like that was supposed to mean. Of course, she said, I wouldn't miss it. Evelyn Mercer's house was a small brick ranch on a quiet street. It was the kind of home that had been loved for 30 years without ever being redesigned to chase trends. Clean floors. Older furniture arranged with care. Family photographs on almost every available surface. The house smelled like roasted chicken and something sweet baking in the oven. The porch light was already glowing when Dorian and Vanessa arrived. Vanessa had dressed carefully, a deep green wrap dress, gold earrings, a smile she could hold without effort. She brought yellow tulips. When Evelyn opened the door, Vanessa offered the flowers with both hands and enough warmth to convince almost anyone watching. Evelyn accepted them. She smiled in the way mothers sometimes smile when they are thinking far more than they are saying. Come on in, she said. Dinner is almost ready. The table was set for 5. Terence was already there, jacket off, leaning against the kitchen counter when they entered. Anne looked toward Vanessa. Hey, he said. His voice was polite and completely empty. Lenora arrived soon afterward. She kissed Evelyn on the cheek, hugged Dorian, and took her seat without ceremony. Dinner was good. Real food. Roasted chicken. Rice. Green beans with garlic. Cornbread Evelyn had made from scratch. Conversation moved in the strange, careful way. Conversation moves when most of the people at a table are paying close attention to something no one has mentioned yet. Evelyn told a story about a neighbor. Terence asked Vanessa about work and listened with his chin resting against one hand. Lenora refilled her water more than once and said very little. Vanessa was at her best. She laughed at the right moments, asked Evelyn about photographs on the walls, complimented the cornbread twice. When Dorian said something that made everyone laugh, Vanessa reached over and touched his arm. She was performing beautifully. She had no idea that every other person at the table already knew the truth Dorian had been carrying. Dorian watched her. He ate his dinner. He allowed the evening to continue. After the plates were cleared, Evelyn brought out a simple birthday cake. Yellow cake with white frosting and candles glowing on top. They sang. They ate. The table began to relax into dessert. The way tables often do when everyone believes the difficult part of an evening is already behind them. Dorian set down his fork. I want to say something, he said. His voice was quiet and unhurried. The room settled. Before I do, he continued, I want to make sure I'm talking to the person I thought I knew, because everything I'm about to say depends on that. Vanessa looked at him. Her smile remained for a moment. Then something behind her eyes shifted, almost too slightly to notice. Dorian met her gaze calmly. 3 weeks ago, I came home early. You were on FaceTime with Brielle. He paused. I heard the entire conversation. The room became still. I heard you tell her I was sweet. Dorian continued. That sweetness was basically all I had. I heard you say I was just a contractor, and the way you said it made it clear that you meant more than the job title. You meant you couldn't imagine me belonging in certain rooms. You meant you were embarrassed by what I do when you're around people whose opinions matter to you. Dorian looked directly at Vanessa. You called me ordinary. You said I had already peaked and didn't know it. He allowed the words to settle. And you said it was kind of sad that I genuinely believed you were the person I was going to spend my life with. Vanessa's face had gone completely still. During that same period, Dorian continued, I had someone look into Nolan Pierce using public information. Charlotte was 3 months ago. The conference you told me you attended alone. Your involvement with him appears to go back at least a year. Multiple events. Multiple people who saw the familiarity between you. He folded his hands on the table. And Brielle spoke to me recently. She told me what you've been saying to your mother and your sister. That I'm financially unreliable. That my company has no real prospects. That you've been waiting for the right moment to leave. Dorian paused again. She also told me about the relocation discussions. That you and Nolan talked about you moving closer to his regional office. You had a timeline, Vanessa. You already had a destination. I was simply what you were doing while you waited to get there. Silence filled the room. Vanessa straightened in her chair. The warmth disappeared from her expression like a coat she no longer had any reason to wear. You went through my life, she said. The sweetness in her voice was gone. What replaced it was cooler, sharper. You went looking for something to use against me. I listened, Dorian said, in the hallway, while I was standing inside the house. That was a private conversation. People vent. People say things they don't completely mean. Vanessa looked around the table quickly, instinctively measuring the room. Her eyes moved first to Evelyn, then to Lenora. You know how it is, she said. Everybody has a bad week. Everybody says more than they mean sometimes. I've known for 3 weeks, Lenora said. Her voice was quiet and final. Everything Dorian has stated tonight matches the information I've reviewed. Nothing has been exaggerated. Nothing has been mischaracterized. Vanessa stared at her. Terence said nothing. He leaned back in his chair with his arms folded and looked at Vanessa without anger and without satisfaction. Just clarity. The expression of a man who had waited long enough for someone to understand that he finally saw them clearly. The silence stretched. Then Evelyn lifted the napkin from her lap and placed it beside her plate. She looked at Vanessa without heat or drama. Only the steady, tired clarity of a woman who had spent a lifetime reading people and had learned not to waste words once she understood what she was seeing. I cleaned office buildings for 16 years, Evelyn said. So that man had what he needed. I watched him build everything he has with his own hands. From nothing. She paused, and you sat at his table and let him love you, while you were telling your family he wasn't worth keeping. Evelyn looked at Vanessa for a long, quiet moment. I need you to leave my table. Vanessa stood. She reached for her purse. She did not look at Dorian. She walked to the front door. The sound of the door closing behind her was not loud. It was simply final. The table remained quiet. The birthday candles had burned low. Half-eaten slices of yellow cake sat on the plates. Water glasses had left small rings against the tablecloth. Ordinary objects. Solid objects. Dorian sat with his mother, his brother, and one of the oldest trusted people in his life. For the first time in 3 weeks, maybe longer, the ground beneath him felt as though it would hold. The next morning, Dorian called Vanessa. She answered quickly. Vanessa, I'm going to say 4 things, Dorian said. I need you to listen. She went quiet. We're done. His voice remained even. No heat, no tremor. If you need to collect your things from my house, send me a time and I'll make sure I'm not there. After that, don't contact me. He paused. I hope you find what you're looking for. Dorian ended the call. He placed the phone on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment. The house was quiet around him. Morning light came through the window above the sink and stretched across the floor. Dorian poured the rest of his coffee down the drain, rinsed the mug, placed it in the rack, and went to get ready for work. Before reaching the job site, he made one other call. Graham Webb was an important contact at Caldwell Properties, one of Dorian's largest commercial clients, a mid-sized developer he had worked with for 3 years. Dorian had introduced Vanessa's wellness brand to Graham's team for a joint campaign almost 8 months earlier. It had been a professional bridge. Dorian built himself, connecting 2 parts of his life that he had believed were both worth investing in. Graham answered. Dorian, what's good? I want to give you a heads up, Dorian said. He kept the conversation brief and professional. the tone of a man straightening a shared workspace before anyone else had to discover the disorder.
Vanessa and I have separated. I don't expect complications on either side, but I wanted you to hear it directly from me, so there isn't any awkwardness if her name comes up professionally. Graham was quiet for a moment.
I appreciate that. You good? I'm working, Dorian said.
That's the same thing. Graham laughed softly.
Fair enough. We'll talk soon. Dorian ended the call. He pulled into the job site, parked, and climbed out of the truck.
I had not lied about Vanessa.
I had not insulted her. I had not told Graham private details.
I had simply made sure that the first version of the change reaching a professional circle Vanessa had entered partly through Dorian's own relationships was accurate and uncomplicated.
What happened next was not something Dorian arranged. I did not know about it until later.
Brielle made her own choice.
It was not part of a strategy. It was simply a woman who had carried information for too long and finally put some of it down in a place where it traveled farther than she expected.
She was having lunch with a colleague named Maya Patel, who worked in brand partnerships and moved through many of the same mid-sized marketing circles as Vanessa.
The conversation shifted naturally while they were relaxed and off guard.
Brielle said something she had not planned to say.
Not everything.
Not a speech. Just enough.
She said Vanessa had been seriously involved with one man while another man did not know the full situation. She said everything had recently fallen apart badly and in front of people who mattered.
Maya knew someone in Nolan's regional office. Within days, Nolan Pierce knew.
I had not known about Dorian. That part, it turned out, was true. Whatever Vanessa had told Nolan about her personal life, she had managed the story carefully enough that he never understood the reality of Dorian, his name, or the 2 years he and Vanessa had spent building a relationship. When Nolan finally learned the full shape of it, he did not call Vanessa for a dramatic confrontation.
I did not demand explanations. He simply became quiet in the particular way. People sometimes become quiet when they discover they have been used as a piece in someone else's plan without knowing there was a game at all. The relocation Vanessa had been considering, the timeline she had quietly constructed, the future she imagined moving toward while Dorian slept beside her, disappeared without ceremony.
There was no dramatic final scene. There was simply a door that had been open, and then it was not.
Vanessa's mother called her soon afterward. Her sister called too. Neither woman knew every detail.
They knew only what Vanessa herself had told them during the previous months. That Dorian was going nowhere.
That he lacked ambition.
That his finances were unstable. That Vanessa was too driven and too intelligent to stay with him.
They had listened to those stories.
They had nodded. They had reassured her. Now they watched Vanessa begin again alone in an apartment she was suddenly responsible for by herself, without the man she had dismissed, and without the future she had quietly been planning.
Neither woman said much. They did not need to.
Dorian stopped at the jewelry store on his way home from work. He walked inside, placed the small velvet box on the glass counter, and told the woman he needed to return the ring. She asked gently whether everything was all right.
"Everything's fine," Dorian said.
And he meant it.
She processed the return without making the moment larger than it needed to be.
Dorian signed the paperwork, put the receipt in his pocket, and walked back outside. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment with both hands inside his jacket pockets and took stock of what he felt. It was not exactly grief. It was something cleaner. Dorian thought about a wall he had once removed during a renovation. Everyone had assumed the wall was decorative and unimportant. When he took it down, the structure beneath it was solid. The bones of the building were sound, stronger, in fact, than the surface had suggested. That was what this felt like. Dorian walked to his truck and got in. Much later, a magazine arrived at his home. Not a digital notification, not a link forwarded by someone in his network. An actual printed magazine with weight in his hands. Regional Architecture and Design had mailed him an advance copy because Dorian was the subject of one of its features. He carried it inside, finished making coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. He turned to page 47.
The headline read, "Built from the ground up. How Mercer Builds became one of the region's most trusted names in mixed-use renovation." Beneath the headline was a photograph of the completed Delwood project, the $2.4 million mixed-use renovation. Dorian had agreed to take on during the hardest weeks of his personal life. The project was finished and fully occupied. Its brick exterior looked clean and warm in the photograph. Dorian remembered the day the picture had been taken. He had been standing just outside the frame, speaking with one of his crew leaders about a final punch list item. I had not even known the photographer was taking that shot. Dorian read the article slowly, the way he read blueprints. Carefully, detail by detail. The writer had gotten most of it right. She wrote that Mercer Builds had doubled its staff in 14 months. She described the Delwood project, its scale, its schedule, and the challenge of completing a full mixed-use renovation while keeping the job safe and organized. She noted that Dorian's crew completed the project without a single occupational safety and health administration incident and finished 4 days ahead of schedule. She quoted Graham Webb from Caldwell Properties, saying that Dorian Mercer was the contractor you call when you want the job done correctly the first time. Then the article talked about Micah Grant. Micah was 26 years old. I had come to Dorian 2 years earlier through a workforce development program. I was young and technically sharp, still rough around the edges in ways that real job site experience would eventually smooth out. Dorian had recognized something in him almost immediately. Not only skill, hunger. The specific hunger of a young man who knows he is capable of more than anyone has trusted him with yet. Dorian mentored Micah through 2 full project cycles. I gave him more responsibility as Micah earned it. I watched him grow into that responsibility. 8 months earlier, Dorian had offered Micah a junior partnership in Mercer Builds, a formal ownership stake, a real title, a seat at the table. The magazine quoted Micah directly. Most people in this industry will use you. Dorian is the first person who showed me what it means to actually invest in somebody. Dorian lowered the magazine and picked up his coffee. He looked through the window toward his backyard. The morning was clear and cold, the kind of cold that made the air feel sharp and clean. His third investment property, a 4-unit building in a neighborhood a couple of miles away, was already fully rented. It produced income quietly in the background, the same way the first 2 properties did. No announcement, no drama, only the steady accumulation of a man who understood that real wealth is often built in layers rather than revealed all at once. Dorian sat with the quiet for a moment. I thought about Vanessa, not with anger, not with grief. The thought arrived and passed through his mind the way a car passes along a distant street. It came, it went. It changed nothing about where Dorian was standing now. Without making any effort to follow her life, he had eventually heard that Vanessa relocated 8 months earlier. A smaller market, a lateral title. The move she had once imagined for herself had narrowed into the version available after the future she wanted fell apart. Dorian did not know the details. I did not search for them. It was no longer his story. His phone buzzed on the table. The message was from Brielle. Saw the feature. You deserve everything in it. That was all. No explanation, no preamble. Dorian read the message once, placed the phone face down, and finished his coffee. Terence later made a reservation at a good restaurant, the kind of place with cloth napkins and a wine list arranged by region. The kind of restaurant Evelyn would have insisted was too expensive and then happily allowed her sons to take her to anyway. The brothers ordered well. They ate slowly. They talked about their mother. Evelyn had finally agreed to let Dorian replace a water heater that had been surviving on borrowed time for years. She had recently gone on a church senior bus trip to Savannah and returned with photographs and very strong opinions about the food. They talked about Terence's work. He had earned a promotion, he tried to describe modestly, even though he was clearly proud of it. Then they talked about Dorian's next project, a residential development on the east side, 3 single-family homes, a smaller footprint than Delwood, but cleaner margins. There was no heaviness in the conversation, no performance. At some point between the main course and dessert, Terence looked across the table at his brother. You look different than you did a year ago, he said. Different how? Terence thought about it. Like yourself, he said, like you're actually here. Dorian nodded once. I did not add anything. Terence did not need him to. Dorian drove home alone after dinner. He pulled into the driveway, shut off the engine, and sat for a moment inside the dark truck. The neighborhood was quiet. A porch light across the street cast a small warm circle onto the pavement. Dorian did not think about Vanessa.
I thought about the East Side project, the soil reports he needed to review, a conversation he wanted to have with Micah about managing subcontractors. Then Dorian opened the truck door and went inside. Nick got to work. Maybe that is the quiet lesson in Dorian's story. Not every person who looks ordinary is standing still. Some people build in silence. They save quietly, learn quietly, grow quietly. They do not announce every plan because they are too busy laying the foundation beneath it. And sometimes the hardest thing to discover is not that someone misunderstood your future. It is that someone close to you had already decided your value without truly seeing the work you were doing. Dorian could not control the way Vanessa judged him. He could not change the private story she had told herself, or the version of him she had repeated to other people. What he could control was the way he responded once the truth became clear. He did not humiliate her publicly. He did not threaten her. He did not try to destroy her career or chase Nolan into a confrontation. He protected what belonged to him, verified the facts, listened to people he trusted, drew a boundary, and walked away when staying would have required him to ignore what he now knew. That kind of restraint is easy to overlook because it is not loud, but real strength often is not loud. It can look like correcting a young worker without embarrassing him. It can look like remembering the daughter of a crew member or asking whether someone's truck finally got fixed. It can look like giving a young man, such as Micah, a real stake in a company because somebody once gave you the chance to prove what you could become. It can also mean understanding that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. You can release anger without reopening a door that no longer feels safe. You can wish someone well without giving them another opportunity to decide your worth for you. Our choices have consequences, but those consequences do not have to become cruelty. Vanessa made choices based on what she believed Dorian was. Dorian made his own choices once he learned the truth. In the end, what mattered most was not that one person's plans collapsed while another person's business grew. What mattered was that Dorian did not allow betrayal to turn him into someone he would not respect. He kept building. He invested in people. He stayed responsible for the life in front of him, and he learned that being underestimated does not reduce your value. Being unseen does not erase your progress. Sometimes the healthiest second chance is not a second chance with the person who hurt you. Sometimes it is the chance to return fully to yourself, with clearer boundaries, wiser judgment, and enough kindness left to keep building something good. I hope you enjoyed that story. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I've picked out 2 more stories for you that I think you'll really enjoy.